Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel Steel versus Oil. One empire aimed to uplift society, the other sought total domination of industry. But in the end, who truly won the battle for American wealth? In the late 19th century, America was rising fast, fueled by ambition, innovation, and an all-out war between two of the most powerful men in its history. Andrew Carnegie, the Scottish immigrant who believed in building a better world through steel and philanthropy. John D. Rockefeller, the calculating oil baron who reshaped capitalism with ruthless precision. Their paths were different, their visions clashed, and their influence still echoes through the halls of modern power. As the camera pans over smoky skylines, roaring furnaces, and the golden shimmer of oil, we glimpse a nation transforming, and two men at the center of it all. Headlines scream of monopolies and revolutions, boardrooms fill with whispers of mergers and betrayals. Behind the public facades, private ambitions burned brighter than any forge or refinery. This is more than a story of riches. It's a story of visionaries, of power plays that defined capitalism, of how two men rewrote the rules of American industry. This is the untold story of Carnegie and Rockefeller, the titans who didn't just build fortunes. They built America. After the Civil War, America entered a period of explosive growth, an age of invention, ambition, and unchecked opportunity. Railroads crisscrossed the continent, cities swelled with immigrants chasing a better life, and factories roared day and night. This was the Gilded Age, a time when the glittering promise of prosperity masked the brutal realities beneath. Industrial capitalism surged forward like a freight train. New technologies and financial speculation created unprecedented wealth for a select few. For the masses, though, the American dream often meant long hours, low wages, and dangerous working conditions. A thin elite sat atop a vast pyramid of labor, lavish mansions rising while tenement slums festered below. In this volatile landscape, two men emerged who would come to define the era. Andrew Carnegie, born in a one-room cottage in Scotland, arrived in America with nothing. But he had drive. Starting as a bobbin boy in a cotton factory, he worked his way up through the telegraph office and the railroad industry. He became a master of timing, spotting opportunities others missed. Carnegie believed in the power of education, hard work, and above all, steel. John D. Rockefeller, by contrast, was born in New York to a modest but stable family. From an early age, he was methodical, frugal, and fiercely disciplined. While Carnegie was charismatic and idealistic, Rockefeller was quiet, relentless, and calculating. Where Carnegie saw industry as a tool to elevate humanity, Rockefeller viewed it as a battlefield to be conquered. His weapon? Oil. Both men rose from humble beginnings during a time when the rules of business were still being written. They didn't just play the game, they defined it. And as their empires grew, so did the tension between their competing visions of America's future. Andrew Carnegie's story begins in the rough industrial town of Dunfermline, Scotland. Born in 1835 to a family of weavers, his early life was steeped in poverty. When the textile industry collapsed, the Carnegies made the bold move to America in search of a better future. Settling in Allegheny, Pennsylvania, young Andrew began working at just 13, first in a cotton mill, then as a telegraph messenger. But even as he delivered messages across town, he was delivering a promise to himself. He would rise. Carnegie was hungry not just for money, but for knowledge. He devoured books borrowed from a local benefactor's library, often after long days at work. He studied the patterns of business, the movements of markets, the lessons of history. His time at the Pennsylvania Railroad was transformative. There, he learned how industries connected, how leadership worked, and, most importantly, how timing and ambition could turn opportunity into empire. He believed in merit, in hard work, and in giving back. His philosophy was rooted in self-improvement and the idea that wealth came with responsibility. John D. Rockefeller's journey began in a very different setting. Born in 1839 in Richford, New York, he was raised in a deeply religious household. His mother instilled discipline, thrift, and the value of hard work. His father, a traveling salesman with a questionable reputation, taught young John the hard edge of negotiation and deal-making. These conflicting influences shaped Rockefeller into a man who was both devout and ruthless. He started young, keeping meticulous financial records and saving every penny. His first real job was as a bookkeeper in Cleveland, Ohio. He quickly understood the value of precision and control. Then came his introduction to oil, black gold. Rockefeller didn't just see oil as a commodity. He saw an opportunity to bring order to a chaotic, booming industry. With his deep sense of strategy and obsession with efficiency, he built an oil refining business that would soon evolve into Standard Oil. Carnegie and Rockefeller were both titans of industry, but they approached power and legacy from fundamentally different philosophies and personalities. Carnegie, born poor in Scotland and raised with Enlightenment ideals, believed deeply in the notion of self-improvement and social uplift. He saw capitalism as a means not just for personal gain, but as a tool to elevate society. His investment in libraries, education, and the arts wasn't just philanthropy, it was part of a moral framework. Carnegie envisioned a world where industrial success could coexist with broad cultural advancement. To him, wealth was a responsibility, not merely a reward. Rockefeller, on the other hand, was shaped by a world of tight margins and business discipline. From a young age, he was cautious, reserved, and methodical. Where Carnegie was expansive and open-handed, Rockefeller was inward, controlled, and exacting. He viewed the chaos of early capitalism as a system needing order, an order he believed he was uniquely suited to provide. His empire, Standard Oil, wasn't just a company, it was a machine for economic efficiency. While critics saw monopoly and manipulation, Rockefeller saw structure, stability, and predictability in a turbulent economy. Despite these differences, both men were responding to the same moment in history, a rapidly industrializing America, full of raw potential where old systems no longer applied. Carnegie leaned into expansion and inspiration, forging steel that built cities and railways. Rockefeller leaned into consolidation and discipline, refining oil that powered machines and homes. Carnegie spoke to dreams, Rockefeller to systems. In their own ways, they redefined what it meant to be powerful in America. Carnegie wanted to be remembered as a builder of civilization, Rockefeller as a master of order and longevity. They took different roads, but each reshaped the American economy and its culture around their vision. Their rivalry wasn't one of open conflict, but of contrasting ideologies, both rooted in a desire to leave a lasting imprint on the world. Andrew Carnegie's empire was built on steel, the backbone of the modern world. Railroads, bridges, skyscrapers, all needed vast amounts of strong, affordable steel, and Carnegie saw the future before anyone else did. He pioneered vertical integration, a strategy that meant owning every part of the production process. From the iron mines to the railroads that shipped his product, Carnegie controlled it all. This allowed him to cut costs, boost efficiency, and dominate the market. The centerpiece of his empire was the Homestead Steel Works near Pittsburgh, a symbol of American industrial might. But beneath the shining surface of progress was a darker truth. Carnegie, though publicly philanthropic and committed to self-improvement ideals, allowed his managers to take a hard line with labor. The most infamous example came in 1892 during the Homestead Strike, when workers protesting wage cuts were met with armed Pinkerton agents. The strike turned violent and left multiple people dead. While Carnegie distanced himself from the event, the damage to his reputation lingered. It exposed the brutal reality of industrial capitalism, where the quest for efficiency often came at the cost of human lives. On the other side stood John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil. Where Carnegie focused on production, Rockefeller mastered control. He built his empire through horizontal integration, buying out or crushing competitors until Standard Oil dominated over 90% of U.S. oil refining. His tactics were cold, calculated, and shockingly effective. Cutthroat pricing, secret railroad, rebates, and strategic partnerships that left rivals no choice but to sell or collapse. This monopoly didn't go unnoticed. The American public and press began to turn on Rockefeller. He was portrayed as the face of corporate greed, and in time, the U.S. government stepped in. Antitrust lawsuits were launched, leading to the eventual breakup of Standard Oil in 1911. Yet even in defeat, Rockefeller profited massively. The pieces of his empire became some of the biggest oil companies in the world. Carnegie and Rockefeller didn't just ride the wave of industrialization, they were the wave. Their economic influence stretched far beyond their respective products. They helped craft the very architecture of modern capitalism. Carnegie's steel became the skeleton of a rising America, bridges, skyscrapers, and railroads that redefined what was physically and symbolically possible. Cities grew upward and outward because of his innovations, and with them came opportunity, but also overcrowding, pollution, and brutal labor conditions in his mills. Rockefeller's oil, meanwhile, was the lifeblood of modern energy. As kerosene-lit homes and gasoline began fueling a revolution in transportation, his empire quietly expanded into every crevice of American life. Through Standard Oil, he didn't just supply energy, he dictated its flow, setting prices, crushing competition, and rewriting the rules of corporate dominance. His business model became the template for monopolies, and later, the reason for the creation of antitrust laws. The wealth they generated didn't just build personal fortunes. It transformed the nation's economy. It accelerated industrial growth, widened class divides, and gave rise to a new kind of corporate aristocracy. At the same time, their practices triggered fierce backlash, from muckrakers exposing abuses, to workers striking for fair wages, to politicians calling for reform. The Gilded Age they helped define glittered on the surface, but underneath it seethed with tension. And yet, when the factories quieted and the trusts were broken up, their legacies endured, in city skylines, in university endowments, in the shape of capitalism itself. They were empire builders, yes, but their empires weren't just built of steel and oil. They were built of ambition, contradiction, and an unshakable belief in progress, no matter the cost. As their empires grew, so did the contrast between Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller, not just in how they made their money, but in how they believed it should be used. Carnegie became the face of philanthropic capitalism. In 1889, he published his famous essay, The Gospel of Wealth, which laid out his belief that the rich had a moral obligation to redistribute their fortunes for the public good. "The man who dies rich dies disgraced," he wrote. And Carnegie lived by that creed. He poured his fortune into libraries, schools, universities, and cultural institutions. Over 2,500 Carnegie libraries were built across the English-speaking world. He funded scientific research, supported world peace efforts, and established the Carnegie Foundation to ensure his legacy endured. Rockefeller also gave, vastly, but his path was more complex. Deeply religious, he believed his wealth was a blessing from God, and giving was a spiritual duty. He tithed even in his early days and later established institutions like the University of Chicago and the Rockefeller Foundation, which tackled global health, education, and science. But unlike Carnegie, Rockefeller's giving often came after years of public backlash and legal battles. Many viewed his philanthropy as an attempt to cleanse a legacy built on ruthless, monopolistic practices. Their public images reflected these differences. Carnegie was seen, at least by many, as a benevolent industrialist, a man who had worked hard and then given back. He courted the media, gave interviews, and positioned himself as a friend of the common man. Rockefeller, in contrast, was far more secretive and reclusive. He became a symbol of unchecked greed, often portrayed in cartoons as a sinister monopolist, squeezing the life out of smaller businesses. Crowds even jeered him in public later in life. Despite both towering over the American economy, Carnegie and Rockefeller rarely interacted directly. Their industries didn't overlap much, and their competition was more ideological than financial. Still, they occasionally took veiled jabs at each other. Carnegie criticized monopolies and once mocked Rockefeller's tactics by saying, "I would rather be my own servant than a servant to others' greed." Rockefeller, ever cool, rarely responded in public, preferring quiet dominance to debate. Carnegie and Rockefeller's philosophies weren't just personal beliefs. They were blueprints for how wealth could interact with society. Carnegie, influenced by his own rise from poverty and his reading of social philosophy, famously articulated his views in The Gospel of Wealth. He argued that the rich had a moral duty to redistribute their fortunes in ways that promoted education, opportunity, and self-improvement. To him, money wasn't meant for idle inheritance or luxury. It was meant to elevate humanity. That's why he built libraries, founded universities, and funded cultural institutions. He wanted to light paths for others to climb. Rockefeller, by contrast, saw wealth as a tool for order and efficiency. His philanthropy was precise, strategic, and often cloaked in quiet influence. He poured money into public health, education, and scientific research, but always with an eye toward creating systems that could be optimized, scaled, and controlled. If Carnegie gave to inspire, Rockefeller gave to engineer outcomes. His legacy includes foundations that still shape global health and education today, not through one-time gifts, but through institutions designed to last. To the public, these differences weren't subtle. Carnegie, the gentleman philanthropist, was seen as generous and idealistic, even if his labor practices were harsh. Rockefeller, often caricatured as the cold monopolist, was viewed with suspicion. His donations, seen as attempts to cleanse a ruthless past. Over time, though, both men's legacies evolved, and together they forced Americans to confront an enduring question. What responsibilities come with immense wealth? Their lives became mirrors reflecting broader anxieties about capitalism, about fairness, power, and purpose. And the way they chose to give shaped not just how they were remembered, but how future generations of billionaires would be judged. When the industrial wars were over and both men stepped away from the business world, their focus shifted fully to legacy, how they would be remembered, and what lasting impact their fortunes would have on America and the world. Andrew Carnegie sold his steel empire to J.P. Morgan in 1901 for $480 million, over $15 billion today. With his newfound freedom and enormous wealth, he committed himself to giving it away. His libraries became a hallmark of American towns and cities, temples of knowledge for anyone willing to learn. He funded Carnegie Mellon University, the Carnegie Institution for Science, and the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. He believed education was the key to a better society, and he gave accordingly. By the time of his death in 1919, Carnegie had given away over 90% of his wealth. John D. Rockefeller also turned to philanthropy in his later years, but with a more systemic approach. He established the Rockefeller Foundation in 1913, which would become one of the most powerful forces in global philanthropy. It funded breakthroughs in medicine, like the eradication of hookworm in the American South, and major advancements in public health infrastructure. He also supported higher education, founding the University of Chicago and transforming it into a world-class institution. Rockefeller lived to 97, dying in 1937, having given away more than $500 million in his lifetime, a staggering sum for the era. But beyond their charitable acts, the impact of their business philosophies lingered. Carnegie's belief in responsibility and reinvestment in society influenced generations of philanthropists, from Bill Gates to Warren Buffett. His Gospel of Wealth is still cited as a foundational text for ethical capitalism. His name lives on in schools, libraries, music halls, and peace institutions. Rockefeller's influence, though quieter, may have been even more far-reaching. His model of centralized, vertically integrated business became the blueprint for corporate America. His foundation's work in public health set the standard for modern philanthropy, data-driven, global, and deeply influential. And while his name is often associated with monopoly and excess, it also marks hospitals, universities, and medical breakthroughs that have saved millions of lives. So, who won the battle? If measured by wealth, Rockefeller edges out. His fortune, adjusted. For inflation remains the largest personal fortune in American history. If judged by ideals, many might say Carnegie won, with his vision of uplifting the common man through knowledge and opportunity. Carnegie and Rockefeller weren't merely tycoons of the Gilded Age. They were architects of a new economic era. Their legacies, while contrasting in personality and philosophy, are two halves of the same story, the rise of modern American capitalism. Andrew Carnegie gave capitalism a human face, or at least the aspiration of one. His belief in the moral obligation of the wealthy, the idea that riches should be used to benefit society, laid the groundwork for the philanthropic model we recognize today. When he built libraries, concert halls, and universities, he wasn't just giving away money, he was shaping an ideal. He offered a version of capitalism where success wasn't only measured in profits, but in how that success was reinvested into the public good. Carnegie showed that capitalism could have a conscience, even if that conscience came only after the fortune had been made through tough business practices. John D. Rockefeller, on the other hand, gave capitalism its backbone, its system, its discipline, its efficiency. His creation of Standard Oil was more than just a business triumph. It was a masterclass in vertical integration, supply chain, control, and organizational management. Rockefeller didn't just dominate an industry, he redefined how industries could be managed. His approach to business, precise, methodical, and deeply focused on consolidation, became a model for corporate structure that's still studied in business schools today. Their legacies are inseparable because they built on each other. Carnegie's steel girded the skyscrapers and railroads that Rockefeller's oil helped run. One forged the physical framework of America's growth, the other powered its engine. Together, they turned a frontier economy into an industrial empire, and their influence didn't end with their deaths. The foundations they created, both literal and institutional, still shape public health, education, arts, and sciences. Their methods are mimicked by CEOs, their philanthropic strategies by today's billionaires. Their names may adorn university buildings, hospital wings, and museums, but their true legacy is less visible and more enduring. They help define what it means to wield power in a capitalist society, to understand the evolution of American I. Capitalism is to understand Carnegie and Rockefeller. One gave it ideals, the other gave it infrastructure. And in doing so, they didn't just shape their own time, they wrote the rules for ours. In today's world, the shadows of Carnegie and Rockefeller still loom large. The rise of modern billionaires like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Bill Gates echoes many of the same questions America faced a century ago about wealth, power, innovation, and responsibility. Take Jeff Bezos, the architect of Amazon. Much like Rockefeller, Bezos built his empire through ruthless efficiency, scale, and control. Amazon's dominance in retail, cloud computing, and logistics mirrors Standard Oil's grip on the oil industry. Critics argue that Bezos, like Rockefeller, prioritized expansion and market dominance over labor rights and ethical concerns. Yet Bezos has also turned toward philanthropy in recent years, though not at the scale of his predecessors, at least not yet. Elon Musk is a different figure, more of a visionary in the mold of Carnegie. Bold, controversial, and mission-driven, Musk talks openly about changing the world through electric vehicles, space exploration, and AI. His personality is brash, and his methods often chaotic, but his ambitions are undeniably sweeping. Like Carnegie, he seeks to reshape the future, though it's unclear whether he'll follow through with large-scale giving as Carnegie once did. Then there's Bill Gates, arguably the most direct spiritual heir to both men. A tech titan who turned his focus almost entirely to philanthropy, Gates embodies Carnegie's belief in using wealth to uplift society, but he also employs Rockefeller's strategic, data-driven approach. The Gates Foundation's work in global health, education, and vaccine development has affected millions worldwide, echoing both the scale and precision of Rockefeller's own efforts. Yet the debate rages on. In a world of rising inequality, does philanthropy justify such immense personal fortunes? Can billionaires ever truly give back enough to balance the scales? Carnegie believed wealth came with responsibility. Rockefeller believed it came with divine purpose. Modern billionaires often walk the line between the two, some embracing the spotlight of giving, others resisting calls to redistribute their wealth. That reflection is as timely as ever. Today's tech moguls, whether launching spacecraft, disrupting transportation, or building AI empires, are walking a path paved by Carnegie and Rockefeller. The tools have changed, but the questions haven't. The Gilded Age has simply been rebranded as the Digital Age. Carnegie believed in the gospel of wealth, the notion that the rich had a duty to give back. He built libraries so the poor could educate themselves, believing that knowledge was the path to empowerment. Today, we see echoes of that in billionaire philanthropy, foundations funding education, healthcare, or global development. But just like in Carnegie's day, these gestures often come after vast fortunes have been accumulated, sometimes through the exploitation of labor, data, or ecosystems. The question remains, is philanthropy a cure or a bandage? Rockefeller, by contrast, embodied the raw mechanics of scale and control. He pioneered monopoly tactics that would later trigger antitrust laws, and yet, the consolidation he championed mirrors what we now see in big tech, companies owning the platforms, the data, the infrastructure, and even the narrative. Then it was oil. Now it's algorithms. What Carnegie and Rockefeller began wasn't just industrial growth. It was a new way of thinking about power. Not just political power, but economic and cultural. They taught America that influence could be bought, shaped, and institutionalized. Today's moguls follow that same playbook, wielding not just money but global platforms, social reach, and even ideological influence. So when we look at today's billionaire class and ask, have we learned? The answer is complicated. We've inherited their structures, their debates, and their contradictions. And like them, we're still struggling to balance innovation with ethics, ambition with accountability. The mirror is still there. And if we look closely, it doesn't just reflect the past. It challenges the future. Two men, two visions. One, nation forever changed. Andrew Carnegie believed in the power of knowledge, of self-betterment, of using wealth as a tool to uplift humanity. He built his empire with steel, then dismantled his fortune piece by piece, constructing libraries, funding education, and preaching a gospel of giving. John D. Rockefeller believed in order, discipline, and the divine right of industry. He built a monopoly so vast it changed the way business worked, and then turned his sights to science, health, and the silent shaping of the modern world. Both rose from humble beginnings. Both shaped the course of capitalism. But their paths diverged in how they saw the purpose of wealth. For Carnegie, money was a means to empower others. For Rockefeller, it was a force to be mastered, directed, and sustained. Their legacies still ripple through our world today, in the skyscrapers that reach for the clouds, in the medicines that extend our lives, in the ongoing debates about how much is too much and who should decide. So now, the question passes to us. If you had that kind of wealth, would you build an empire or give it all away? The story of Carnegie and Rockefeller isn't just history. It's a choice, one every generation must face again. Now, I want to hear from you. Who do you admire more, Andrew Carnegie or John D. Rockefeller? Was it Carnegie's vision of a better society, or Rockefeller's dominance and strategic genius that leaves a bigger mark on history? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let's discuss. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the titans of industry, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, share it with friends, and subscribe to History Revealed for more fascinating content. And stay tuned, because next time, we're diving into the life of another giant, J.P. Morgan, the banker who owned America. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.